Today we're going to be talking about photography hacks to market your properties, and this is just going to be a beginner's guide, right? So I'll give a few more minutes for anyone else that wants to join us, and yeah, once we're good to go, we're going to start moving in, and we'll try to get through as much information as possible. There's a lot to cover here, and like I said, this is all beginner tips, right? So these aren't going to be very advanced. We're not going to talk about expensive equipment or any advanced techniques. These are all the basic tips that you actually need to know before you take a single photo of your property, right? And some of these you might already know, but I guarantee there's going to be something in here that's very useful and that you could start applying right now. You don't need to spend any money. This is all just your approach, and we're going to walk through step by step with examples. All right, welcome everyone. And by the way, I'll keep looking down here because I have the chat open. But once we get started, what we're going to do is we're going to have a moderator in the chat, and they're going to be answering questions as we go along. But if you have a question specifically for me or something that I talk about here, I will also do a Q&A at the very end. So, I don't want to get sidetracked with answering too many questions during the live stream itself, but definitely towards the very end, we will answer questions, and hopefully you guys can use these tips to market your properties and do amazing things and get some great results. All right. I think we're just about ready to get started. So this is photography hacks, as we all know, for marketing your properties. Now, first off, what is wrong with these pictures? Or is there anything wrong with these pictures, I'll let you guys take a minute to decide. But let's say if these were the photos that you were looking at a listing that you were trying to, go back, that if you were planning to rent out or that you wanted to go see, would these photos necessarily be great? I don't know. I see some things that could change, but yeah, just take a minute, take a look around. Photos might be a bit dark. They're kind of shot halfway through the room, strange angles. There's weird little insert shots here of the paintings on the wall. So in my opinion, not very great. All right. Now, as I mentioned just a minute ago, you don't need to be a professional photographer to apply these tips, right? You're not going to need any sort of advanced techniques. Once you start doing photography, if you have a hobby or you have like a professional camera, you have to learn about the exposure triangle and how to edit raw images and do all this other stuff. But that might be a topic for a future class. In this class, however, in this webinar, we're going to talk about stuff that you can do just with your smartphone. All right? Now, why is it important to take good photos? We're going to take a minute to answer this question because that is actually very important, right? We want to know the why, and it might already be clear to a lot of you, but we're going to go over it just to really hammer that point home to make sure that you're applying these tips. Okay. So yeah, the first reason is that you want to stand out against your competitors, right? So the way that I look at it is that whenever you are taking pictures of your property and putting them up online, that's your opportunity to stand out against your competitors, right? So let's say you have one person who they put all their filters in their listing website of their choice, and they already know the square footage, they know the area they want to be in, they have a price range, number of bedrooms. These are uncontrollable factors, right? You don't have control over how many bedrooms are in the unit. The square footage, you can't increase it, although that would be amazing, wouldn't it? But these are things you don't have control over. What you do have control over is how you present these properties to the world and how you can make it stand out, right? So you want to have a good first impression. And the reason that matters is, let's say that you take some great photos, right, using the tips here, and now based on all the other options that your prospective tenant has, they're most excited about yours because it looks so nice, it looks so inviting, it looks clean and open, and so they might go see yours first, which is what we want, right? Once they see yours first, then no matter what other properties or units that they look at after that, they're going to be comparing them to yours, right? So your property is going to be in their mind the most, right? They're going to be constantly thinking about it, and in marketing, that is a very powerful thing because our minds have a very limited number of things that we can focus on throughout the day, and having your properties in their minds as much as possible is an amazing place to be. All right, next. Today the market is very image-centric, right? And what that means is that look at the average person today. What are they doing, right? Throughout the day, they're going on YouTube. They're seeing these polished versions of reality from their favorite YouTube stars, from the advertisements that they're being fed. They're going on their phones. They're looking at Instagram, TikTok, and they're seeing all this amazing polished content that's getting millions of views, that has huge budgets, right? They're watching movies, TV shows that have set designers and prop managers, and they have huge budgets to spend to make places look amazing, right? The environments that these characters are in. So imagine you're looking at that all day, constantly being like bombarded with this amazing content, very polished, and then you look at a bad listing picture, right? There's like 3 pictures, they're kind of dark, kind of grungy. That's such a disconnect, right? And it's not used to what we normally see throughout our days. So I'm not saying you have to have a huge budget and, pay interior designers and do all this extra stuff, but you want to set the bar high for yourself and not rush through these things, right? You want to give it the time and effort that it warrants. All right, and then this kind of like feeds into the last point, just expanding upon it a little bit, but everyone nowadays has access to high quality cameras on their phone, so they're used to even taking good pictures themselves, not just consuming it, right? And millennials, Gen Z, they make up up to or more than 40% of the U.S. population right now, and they're constantly consuming this type of content. So, how do you meet their expectations that they have? And then obviously it's not just millennials and Gen Z, but every previous generation, they've been watching amazingly put together ads and TV shows, movies. So it's really everyone when you really think about it. But the sort of mindset that we're in right now is getting exaggerated a little bit. All right, let's go back. Now, very interesting. There was a case study done by Airbnb. This article was posted by AirDNA. They're amazing for research, for rental properties, for Airbnb as well, short-term rentals. And let's see if we can open that up. All right. All right, so now we've opened up the link and we're looking here. And yeah, only about 15% of these people on Airbnb, right, that own these properties that are trying to get them rented out, only about 50% actually hire professional photographers. So if you're competing against that, it's really not that bad. Not that many people are really putting in the effort to make their photos as good as they can be, right? Now, there's also a ton of great information here on this page. Again, the link is there. We'll send you the presentation or the link afterwards, so you can check it out for yourself. But there's a lot of good tips here, like we're going to talk about in a minute. The lead photo, or what they call like the magnet photo. You want to have that first. You want to draw people in. But essentially, what the data shows is that you are much more likely to rent out your property fast. Here, we'll just go back here. There we go. But essentially what it says is that you're much more likely to rent out your property quickly and get the right people interested if you take good photos, right? Now, here's a real-world example. I just pulled these up, the other day, and you can see here, these are all the photos for a 2-bedroom in South Beach, right, on Miami Beach. And obviously these photos are not terrible, but there's a lot of gaps here, right? Like, where's the kitchen? Where are the bathrooms? Am I really getting a sense of the space? Not really. And even this photo is nice of the South Beach area. Very beautiful. Everyone loves it. Miami, blah, blah, blah. But we don't actually see the unit itself. So the issue that could bring up is that if you're not showing off how the apartment looks, where it is, I get it. Maybe the bathroom doesn't look that great and you want to avoid it. But what happens whenever you waste time showing people around the property, right, that you thought were interested, and then they have a problem with the layout of the bathroom or the exterior of the house? You want to give them the full picture so you're getting the right people through the door and not wasting more of your time, right? And in this example, we have like some repeating pictures. In general, these just aren't very good. You know, you have some pictures here where all the lights aren't on and it looks a bit dark. It doesn't look that warm and inviting. And again, we're going to talk about some tips on how we can do that in a way that is free. We don't spend any money. All right. So what equipment do you need? Obviously, we already know the answer if you've been with us from the beginning. All you really need is your smartphone, right? Your smartphone's always with you. Most modern smartphones take great pictures, right? And if you're using a wide enough lens on your smartphone, then you're able to capture a ton of the property, of the space, or of each room to really show it off to its best potential. And the cool thing is that smartphones, they will take care of all the processing for you, right? So a lot of what happens with smartphones nowadays, we're going to talk a little bit more about this in a little bit, but what it'll actually do is it'll take multiple exposures. So it'll take a darker photo for any area that's too bright. It'll take a brighter photo for any area that's too dark. And it'll combine them. It does magic. It sharpens things up. It makes the colors look beautiful. You don't have to do any of the extra work there. And a smartphone is really a great option in most cases, especially if you don't have a budget. Now, the settings you might want to use, I personally, for all the examples that I'm going to show, I just use the JPEG setting, right? So JPEG is like the most common photo format that every website, every mobile app, it's universal. Everyone's going to accept it. And, you know, if you took it in a RAW format or a semi-RAW format, like HEIC on the iPhone or HEIF, then you'll have to actually convert it to a JPEG later on. So it's a little bit extra work. You have a tiny bit more flexibility in your editing, but we're not doing any advanced editing here, guys, so this really is not important. We'll stick to something that's as convenient as possible because we want to have the least amount of steps as possible here. All right, in most cases with newer iPhones, the HDR is already on. HDR basically means high dynamic range. And there's a little representation here of what dynamic range is. So up here you have lower dynamic range cameras, and all the way down here you have higher dynamic range cameras, right? And the dynamic range is basically how much brightness and darkness can the camera capture at once. I don't know if you've ever taken a Zoom call, for example, or tried to take a selfie with the bright window behind you and you're indoors. It usually just looks super, super bright outside. And, you know, when you look at it, it really doesn't look that bright, right, to your naked eye. But most cameras have a limit of how much dynamic range they can actually capture at once. So what the HDR does is, like I said earlier, it'll take two different exposure photos, one bright for the outside, one dark for the inside. It'll combine them for you and make it into one beautiful looking photo. So in a lot of smartphones, this feature is already turned on, but if it's not in your case, then you can go ahead and switch that on because the result will look a lot better. All right. Yeah, that's just an example of what the HDR does. See, same shadow on both sides, but you don't really notice it in the second one. All right. Now, why not use a professional camera? Of course, professional cameras are a lot better, but they're more expensive. They can cost thousands of dollars, right? And it might just cost $1,000, $2,000, $3,000 for the body, and then you have to buy a lens separately. They're also harder to operate because you need to know exactly what you're doing, or it's not going to look good because professional cameras, they're not doing any of the processing and the auto exposures, all the auto features that we're so comfortable with on our smartphones. Professional cameras aren't doing these, right? Because a real photographer wants to have control over every aspect of the photo when they're editing it. They don't want the camera guessing and, oh, maybe it looks like this. So the cameras are built that way on purpose, but there is more of a learning curve to it, right? And yeah, I think we pretty much covered everything there. And then we could also talk in a future video or a future webinar about 360 cameras if anyone's interested. This is fascinating for virtual tours, virtual videos. And this is amazing. Essentially what they do is, in most cases, there'll be a camera body, and it'll have two wide lenses on both sides, and they're both capturing as much as possible, and they combine those two images to give you a full 360 view. Yeah, this is an additional cost. There's a steeper learning curve to it, so we're not going to touch on this right now, but just in case you're wondering, that is a great option as well, and we could make a class on it if anyone's interested. You know, please let us know down in the comments. Now, very important, before you take a single photo, you want to tell a story. Make sure you're telling a story, and with all the photos that you're taking, and when I say telling a story, I'm not talking about script, dialogues, and character development and plots and blah blah blah. Obviously, what we mean here is taking them on a journey, right? So we elaborate a little more here. You want to envision yourself giving a tour. So imagine that you had someone come to the apartment, or the single family home, or whatever it is that you're showing. Would you first take them through the front door, or would you start in the bedroom or in the kitchen? Obviously, you want to, in real life, you have to take that natural journey. So I want you to think about this when you're trying to take photos of your properties, right? Because you want to give them a good feel of what the layout is. Now, a good place to start, let's say if this is a multiple bedroom home, you can start with the exterior, show what it looks like, entryway, kitchen, dining room, living room, master bedroom, and all the bathrooms that go along with that, and then any additional bedrooms. So that's sort of the flow that it will start, that it will follow. But very important as well is that you have a magnet photo. What the magnet photo is, we talked about it a few minutes ago if you remember. The magnet photo is the most appealing photo that is going to make people want to click on the property, right? So essentially what the order would be is you'd have your magnet photo first, and then you'd take them on the journey through the apartment. Because it's almost like a thumbnail for like a YouTube video where you want to get people to click on it because they're excited and curious on what the property actually looks like. So in some cases, the first photo, like your magnet photo that you choose, it might be the exterior photo. You never know. It just depends on what you think is going to get people the most interested. All right? All right, now, is there such thing as taking too many photos, right? I want to say no, because in a lot of cases, like some of the examples that I showed earlier, they really weren't taking that many photos, and there was a lot of detail I was missing, right? And if you're leaving out detail, they may just lose interest because they say, oh, I don't know if this looks right for me, or they may show up and be disappointed, right? So you want to give them the opportunity. All cards are on the table. Here's my property. Do you want to check it out or not, right? And yeah, exactly. Don't leave anything to the imagination. You want them to know exactly what they're walking into. It just saves a lot of time for you and for them at the end of the day. So more is more. In general, let's say if it's a apartment, right, a one bedroom, a studio, don't be afraid to take 10 photos, right? And anything bigger than that, you can go up to 20, 30 photos. Like you probably don't want to exceed 40 photos because that is just way, way, way too much. Maybe for a bigger house, you might get close to that. But in general, I'd say that's a good range. Now, what about lighting? Don't be intimidated because all of this professional looking equipment is not what we're going to be talking about today. This is how a professional photographer would do it. So they'd have their camera, whoops, go back. They have their camera on a tripod with a trigger on top. And every time they click a photo, it will trigger these flashes here to brighten it up so bright that it just looks incredible. It looks amazing. But this obviously costs a lot of money. So what is our alternative to this? All right. So the alternative is let the light shine through. Now, there's actually two reasons that you'd want to do this, right? You'd want to open up the curtains to let more light in. That's great because smartphone cameras especially, they have very tiny sensors, right? And the smaller the sensor, the less it's able to capture light. Because, a professional camera will have a sensor that's like this big, right? For example. And a smartphone camera's sensor is a fraction of the size. So it's much more, it's a lot worse at capturing light, especially in darker scenarios. So you want to let light in. But the second part of opening the curtains is that you want people to see the view. Even if it's a bad view, it doesn't matter. Maybe it's nothing to write home about. Excuse me. But this is definitely very important. We want people to be able to see exactly what they're walking into. So that kind of works on two fronts. Now, another thing is you want to plan the right day to shoot. You want to shoot on a sunny day. You could also choose the correct hour because, anyone that has a property that they're trying to rent out, they of course know that there's a certain time of day where the apartment just looks the best. And if you can get those beautiful sun rays coming in through the window, even better, right? But don't shoot on a cloudy day. I know maybe you've already planned a day and then suddenly a bunch of rain clouds came out of nowhere, and then you say, okay, whatever, I'm already here, I'll take the photos. It's much better not to do it, because this will not make the home look warm and inviting and draw people in. Now, another thing that you might think is very basic, and I'm sure a lot of you are already doing this, but I just moved to Miami a couple months ago, and I was looking for an apartment. I can't tell you how many photos I came across where they'll show a bathroom, they'll show a kitchen, they'll show any different part of the house, and the lights are off, and it just doesn't make the house look very warm and inviting. Whenever someone comes to view a house in person, what's the first thing they do? They turn on all the lights. They want to make sure everything's working. They want to see everything, how it looks. So definitely every light that you can, even the smallest light, turn it on. It's going to make the house look a lot better. Trust me. All right. So yeah, here's an example that I took. I took this with my phone. And yeah, as you can see, there are no lights on in here. Obviously, it's a pretty decent space, nice countertop. There's a little bit of furniture in here. It looks all right. But compare that to the second photo when the lights are on. This looks way, way better. Now, the photo is still a bit warm, and with some editing, it could look a little bit better, and we're going to talk about that with this exact photo towards the end once we've gone through all our shooting tips, right? But look at the difference there. Obviously, way better. Now, remember your eye line. This is very important as well. And I just want to say as well that we're going to share a checklist with everyone. A little bit down in the webinar, we'll talk about it after we've gone through all the tips. We're also going to share that with you in case you want to use that for all of your future shoots, just because I know this can be a lot to remember. But anyways, remember your eye line. So I've seen a lot of photos when I was looking for an apartment, right? And even with some past clients that I've had, that they would take the photos from a low angle, right? And most people that are going to come and see your property, they're going to be looking up, around here, and they're going to be looking down towards the countertops, the bathroom, the sink, the stove, everything. They want to see how it looks. So down here, it doesn't show off the property in the best way. And not only that, you're also missing out on some information. You have no idea what it's like up here. You can't see the sink really, and this just looks way, way, way more appealing. I hope you agree. So yeah, always shoot from that higher angle looking a bit down. All right, now framing. We talked about lighting. We talked about, at what angle we should shoot, but what is in this frame, right? What are we actually capturing? So here's another before and after. This, I took it with my normal lens, with the 1x lens on the iPhone, and this I stepped back and I took it with the 0.5 lens, right, with the wider lens. And we're capturing a lot more. And the problem with the first photo is that we really don't have a good sense of what's going on in this room. There could be a wall here or here. We really don't know what we're working with. It feels a lot more open in photo number 2. And, if it was a smaller room, that wouldn't be a problem either. You want to show it how it is. But we're just missing too much information here. So we want to definitely see a lot more. All right. Now, what if you don't have a wide lens on your phone, or the wide lens isn't good? In a lot of cases, the 1x lens, the lens that's not zoomed in or out, just the normal lens that you have on your phone, it will have the best quality, right? And that might not be a surprise to you if you've been using your phone for a while. But how do we take a wider photo with our 1x lens if a wider lens is not an option? So you could do a panorama, and I give an example here where, as you can see, in the first example, right, we take a really long panorama, and we go from one edge to the other, but what's happening is that the room is distorting, right? That's too much going on in one frame, because essentially what it's doing is it's taking a whole bunch of photos and stitching them together. But because the angle is changing, it's warping, and this does not make the house look good. And also, it doesn't give you a sense of the space at all, right? But if you take a short panorama, like from here to here, instead of going all the way crazy with it, you can actually show off the space in a good way. Now, panorama, like, it won't be as perfect as the wide lens because, like I said, trying to get all that information, all that in your frame, it's going to cause a little bit of warping. You can see that at the bottom here. Wait, let me find my mouse. There we go. You can see a little bit of bendy lines here. Doesn't look very good. With the wide lens, like the native wide lens that most cameras have, it will do processing to correct those lines. You won't even notice it happening. It does it in a second, but it corrects those lines. Here, you're not really getting that. So that is something to keep in mind, but honestly, not a deal breaker for me at all. I think this looks great. All right. Now, have you ever heard the phrase, don't back yourself into a corner? In this case, we want you please back up into a corner. Get back there so you can capture as much of the space as possible. And here's a perfect example, right? I took this photo in the middle of the dining table, right? And this pretty much looks like a lot of photos that you're going to see on different listing websites, right? But again, it doesn't show a lot, right? As a viewer, I'm left feeling frustrated because I want to know, like, I wish I could see what's going on there, over there. I don't know how long this counter is. I don't know what's down that hallway. You really don't have a sense of the space. And so what I did here was, in the second photo, I took many, many steps back and just captured the whole thing as a whole, as you can see. All right? And yeah, that leads me directly into my next point. Ignore the details for now. Because what's going to happen is that whenever people are looking on these websites, they want to know what the space is like. How much room do I have to deal with here? What are the windows like? How many bathrooms? Is it a stand-up shower? Do they have a bathtub? Will I be able to fit my existing furniture in this house? What's the layout like? They want to know all of this stuff, right? So if you go and focus in, like we show here, on little details like the painting on the wall, it doesn't really do a lot for you, right? This isn't an art gallery. We're trying to sell the space, all right? And I can think of one really cool example of one photo that I saw on a listing website when I was looking for an apartment here in Miami. And it was pretty creative. So someone took a picture with their phone at the level of the glossy stovetop, right, in the kitchen. And right next to it was the sink, right, with that faucet. So in the glossy stovetop, you could see the reflection of the sink, going down here, and then the actual sink itself. It was a cool looking photo, and I definitely appreciate the creativity, but it doesn't do a lot when you're trying to sell the space, right? All these little details that you think might look nice, that people might want to see, they're going to see that when they get to the apartment, right? When they get to the house or the home or whatever it is, the duplex. They're going to see it once they get there, right? They're going to look at all the details. They're going to try to open the fridge, open the drawers, turn on the shower. They're going to test the heck out of it. So right now we just want to focus on the bigger picture, and that's why we say ignore the details for now. All right. Next, clean up. If you work in real estate, if you work in property management, you already know this. You already do this all the time, right? You know that the house needs to look clean. But what I do see happening sometimes is there are little details that are left unchecked, right? So let's go through a few of the examples here. Sometimes you'll see cleaning materials left out, right? So someone did a cleaning job, and you still see the bleach, the Clorox, or whatever it is on the floor. You can see maybe a broom or a vacuum in the corner somewhere. And of course, we're not trying to hide the fact that we cleaned. That's fine. But we don't need to see that in the photo, right? It needs to look like a perfect looking house, like it's always clean, right? Trash cans, that's a big no-no. We don't have trash cans anywhere. I see a lot of times in many photos, there's just stray wiring on the floor. And what you can do, if there's a wire coming out of the wall that you can't get rid of right now, that's totally fine, but you could push it out of the way, just make it look a little more tidy, right? Toilet seats, always down, 100%. Open cabinets, we don't want that. Open fridges, close all these compartment spaces. The only thing you want to open up is, maybe some doors and Actually, in all cases, I would say, yeah, keep the doors open, make the space feel more open, and opening the curtains like we talked about earlier, right? And yeah, if you have furniture, obviously all these tips apply even if the house is not staged, if there's no furniture included. But if you do have furniture, make sure it looks aligned and it looks neat and in its proper place. All right. Here's another example of cleaning up, right? You can see it's almost like a little spot the difference game. But yeah, there's some bottles in the corner. There's some spices here. You got a trash can. We want to remove all of that. We want it to look clean and tidy. And this is kind of an extreme example because this is a kitchen that someone actually lives in. But it still applies. So any dust, wiring, whatever, get it out of your shot. So yeah, those are pretty much all the tips in terms of shooting, right? So we're going to send this to you. You can download it. But, real quick, you want to plan the journey. You want to choose the right day to shoot on. You want to tidy up, turn all the lights on in the house. And yeah, the list goes on. You get the idea. We don't need to go over everything again. But for sure, you want to keep this with you and make sure that you're checking off all these boxes every time you shoot. Alrighty. Now we have editing, right? And when we talk about editing real estate photos, we don't want to overdo anything. We don't want anything crazy, right? What we want is to enhance a little bit the picture and the space that we have already. So one big thing is that a lot of interior lights will come with slightly warmer lighting, right? Or if it's a bit sunny outside, sometimes your camera will warm up the image a little bit. And this isn't something exclusive to smartphone cameras. Any picture that's taken on any video camera, photo camera, they have something called the white balance, right? And the white balance is essentially adjusting your camera settings to match the light of the room that you're in. So in this case, the camera got it wrong, and that happens all the time. Nothing wrong with that. This can easily be adjusted to make it look a little more like this, a little brighter, and just cooling down the image to make sure that white is white, right? That's the easiest way to check if your white balance is correct or not. Look for something white in the image and adjust it around, adjust the warmth or the coolness to make sure that whatever should be white is white in the image. Okay. Now, what about editing apps? All right. In the name of keeping everything really simple, we're not going to use any editing apps, right? We're only going to use the one that's native to your phone. So whenever you take a photo on your phone, usually you can edit it and make slight adjustments, and that's all we basically need here, right? And like I mentioned in the slide here, most free apps will have the same functionality as the native app to your phone, right? So it's not worth downloading it. The phone app is already optimized to meet all the basic needs that we're going to talk about here, right? And then most paid apps will have extra features, photoshopping and this and that, but we don't need all that, right? We're going to keep it simple and keep it moving forward. Okay. Now, this is just like a quick thing to think about, but there's this company called ARRI. It's sort of like Canon or Sony. They make cameras, but they only make the highest quality cameras, right? They make cameras that they use in Oscar-winning movies, and their cameras can cost $75,000, $100,000. Pretty much the sky's the limit, and they always get most of the Oscars, the Oscar-winning movies, are shot with ARRI. And their philosophy is that they focus more on contrast, right? The dark, the light of the image, than the resolution. Because here's the fun fact, right? ARRI, this huge, expensive camera company, most of their cameras don't shoot in 4K, right? Our phones shoot in 4K. GoPros, action cameras, our DSLRs, all these cameras shoot in 4K, but most of ARRI's cameras don't shoot in 4K because our eyes are less sensitive to resolution than to color. And that's what we're going to apply to our editing right here. All right. Now, a couple do's and don'ts for the editing. We'll start with the do's first. So You want to adjust the brightness levels a little bit. If it's a little bit dark, you've let in as much light as possible through the sunlight, through the windows, through all the lights that you've turned on. But in most cases, you're still going to want to brighten up a little bit just to make the room really shine. Now, you also might want to make some adjustments to the shadows and the highlights. So when you increase the highlights a little bit and you bring the shadows down a little bit, the highlights are essentially the brighter parts of the image, shadows are the darker parts of the image. It's sort of on a spectrum. And when you do that, it makes everything pop out a lot more, and it's a lot more eye-catching, right? So you also want to play around with the color balance, and essentially we talked about that a few slides ago, but that's how warm or cool your image is. So whenever you play with that, you'll know what looks right just based on your eyesight. All right, you can also increase the definition slightly. So the definition, it's kind of like sharpness, but it only applies to certain areas of the image. And definition is just the feature or the tool that they call it in the editing app on the iPhone. So it may go by other names depending on the phone that you have. But essentially, you're sort of enhancing the detail a little bit in the image. All right, now we get to the don'ts. Obviously, you don't want to remove any or digitally remove any wall markings or other visible interior issues. You don't want to Photoshop things out because that can actually be a legal issue, right? That's false advertising, and we definitely don't want to lie to the people that we're advertising to. We want them to know exactly what it looks like, and if there are any issues, they can ask about it. They can say, hey, I noticed that there's some scuffing, or the door looks a bit worn out. Is that going to be replaced? You can answer them, right? These are valid concerns that they might have, but you definitely don't want to hide these things, because once they get to the property, they're going to be disappointed anyways, and they're going to ask these things anyways, right? Another thing is the saturation and the vibrance. So we don't want to mess around too much with this. I'd actually go as far as to say, just leave these alone, because whenever you start messing with saturation and vibrance, the image can start to fall apart, and it can look a bit cheap. A lot of beginner photographers, amateur photographers, they might play around with this a little bit too much, because they say, oh wow, if I increase the saturation, everything's popping out a lot more, and it looks amazing, it looks so eye-catching. But in actuality, it's going to be distracting more than anything, and it can actually look cheaper, right? It can cheapen the quality of the image. So if you look at professional real estate photography, 9 times out of 10, 99% of the time, they're not going to be oversaturating their images. And in most cases, your phone knows exactly how much saturation to add for it to look natural. There's a lot of engineering and processing that goes on behind the scenes that we don't even think about. But you leave it in their hands, and we're not going to be touching any of that. And then increasing sharpness. I know we talked earlier about increasing the definition. Sharpness, it kind of applies to more areas of the image than definition does. So I would avoid messing with this too much. Probably better not to at all. Unless you're really facing some issues, increase it a little bit, but really do not go overboard with this, because it can really cheapen the look of the image. All right? Alrighty. So this is a screen recording that I did where I'm actually editing this photo on my phone that I took on my phone as well. All right. So let's start from the beginning. All right. Here we go. Oops. Uh-oh. Still. Oh, thank you. Bye. Oh, man. All right. Going again. So essentially, the first thing I do is increase the brilliance. And brilliance sort of brings the shadows up and the highlights a little bit down. So I increase the highlights a little bit more just so I can fine-tune it, bring the shadows down a little bit, and that'll add to the contrast, right? You have darker areas, lighter areas, and it really brings things in. Definition, that's... Yeah, wait, hold on. No, okay, sorry. Yeah, now we're playing with the warmth because it was too yellow, it was too warm. You have all these warm lights in the house. So we need to work on that, right? Looking a lot better now. We increase the definition, not too much. You can see you play around with it, and you can see kind of what works well. But for most of these settings, you never, you probably shouldn't be going past 50%, right? And that's your before and after. Yeah, after that, you just save, and you're done. Now, in full screen, let's see what that actually looked like. Let's see. Okay. Whoops. Bye again. Oh my goodness. All right. Now, this is the exact same photo. I just opened up my camera app or my phone gallery and opened the editing section. And there you go, right? Increased the brightness a little bit, played with the played with the contrast, sorry. A little bit of definition, played with the coolness because it was looking a bit too warm. And look at the difference. That looks pretty good if I do say so myself. Yeah, and then last thing, I go into these tips a little bit in this checklist. We're going to send that to you as well. So you have two checklists to work with. You have one for shooting and one for editing, right? And you can just keep that with you. Keep it on your phone or wherever you want. You can save it as a PDF. Just keep it with you so you don't forget anything that we talked about here in this webinar. And all right, guys, that is pretty much it. We covered a lot here. And thank you so much for sticking around with me throughout the entire presentation. And yeah, I know a lot of these tips were pretty basic, but the basics are important because if you think about it, you could apply these tips to any sort of photography job, right? So it doesn't matter what equipment you're using, even if you're using a high-end, $5,000 camera and multiple thousands of dollar lenses. It doesn't matter. These tips will all still apply across the board. So now if you like, you can start applying these tips and see what you can do and just see the results for yourself. You're going to be a professional photographer. Everyone's going to be amazed at the photos that you're taking, and hopefully you'll start being able to, get a lot better results and find people that are actually interested in your property to come and see your property first. All right? So I think we pretty much covered everything here. If there's another class that you'd like to see, for example, if you want to see a class on, how to do phone videography, right, for your property, how to take good phone videos, because that, a lot of the same tips will apply, but once you have moving video, it gets a lot more complicated. You got to talk about the editing, the music, the way that you move around, how to make it look good, right? That can be a lot more complicated. But I guarantee you I could break it down for you and make it very easy and simple to understand. We could also have a class on the 360 virtual tours. I think that would be amazing. So if anyone's interested in that, please let us know. And for sure, we'll try to get to that very, very soon. But with all that said, thank you very much for watching. I was so happy to share this with you. I can't wait to see all the results. And yeah, I'm very excited. Be sure to share this with anyone who could use it. Send them the checklist, show them the presentation, show them this video. And, we just want to help you guys to do the best that you can with your properties, with the resources that you do have already. And with all that said, if you want to see more videos about property management, about our software, useful tips for property managers, that's all we talk about on our social media channels. So check out our YouTube channels for more in-depth videos. You can look at our TikTok, our Instagram for more tips and tricks, really short videos that every day we're uploading. And there's a ton of really good information on there. So make sure